Week 19 of the NHL season brought absolute chaos. We've got a teenager making NHL history, playoff races tightening across both conferences, and teams reminding everyone just how unpredictable this league can be. Some clubs are catching fire at exactly the right time, while others are suddenly collapsing when the pressure is highest. The physicality is ramping up across the league, sticks are flying, tempers are boiling over, and with the trade deadline now behind us, teams are beginning to lock in for the final push toward the Stanley Cup playoffs. This is the part of the season where every point matters. A single win can move a team into a playoff spot, while a single loss can push them several places down the standings. Every mistake feels bigger, every goal feels more important, and the intensity of every shift continues to rise as the regular season slowly starts winding down. And this past week delivered plenty of drama. We saw huge individual performances, emotional moments for longtime veterans, controversial calls that had fans arguing online, and several teams making statements that they are ready to fight for a playoff spot. So let's break down everything that happened during Week 19 of the NHL season. Penguins versus Golden Knights. We'll start things off with the Pittsburgh Penguins taking on the Vegas Golden Knights. Hopefully everyone around the league enjoyed the Olympic break, because the Penguins definitely didn't enjoy the news that followed. The big story coming out of Pittsburgh is that Sidney Crosby is expected to miss at least a month with an injury. That is obviously devastating for the Penguins, especially at this stage of the season when they are trying to keep themselves alive in the playoff race. Crosby has been the heart and soul of that franchise for nearly 2 decades. Losing him at such a critical moment could easily derail their postseason hopes. But surprisingly, when the Penguins returned to the ice after the break, they didn't look discouraged at all. In fact, they came out flying. Pittsburgh completely dominated Vegas from the opening face-off, controlling the pace of play and creating scoring chances throughout the game. By the time the final horn sounded, the Penguins had secured an emphatic 5-0 shutout victory. It was exactly the kind of performance they needed to keep confidence high despite Crosby's absence. Meanwhile, Vegas continues to deal with injury concerns of their own. The Golden Knights have built a reputation over the years for somehow ending up with half their roster on injured reserve at the most convenient times. And it might be happening again. Before the trade deadline even arrived, Mark Stone took what looked like a fairly light cross-check during a play along the boards. But shortly after the hit, he appeared to tweak something and left the ice looking uncomfortable. Golden Knights fans immediately started worrying, because this situation feels very familiar. Stone has dealt with several injuries over the past few seasons, and every time he ends up on long-term injured reserve, it creates endless speculation about how Vegas manages its salary cap situation. Of course, if history tells us anything, there's always the possibility that he'll somehow be perfectly healthy again right when the playoffs begin. But for now, Vegas will have to find ways to stay competitive without their captain at full strength. Blackhawks surprise Utah. Next up, we had another surprising blowout result, this time involving the Chicago Blackhawks. Yes, the Blackhawks. Chicago has struggled for much of the season, which made this result even more unexpected. Goaltender Arvid Soderblom had one of the best games of his career, shutting out Utah completely and turning aside everything that came his way. Utah entered the game hoping to strengthen its position in the Western Conference playoff race. Instead, they ran into a goalie who simply refused to let anything past him. Time after time, Soderblom came up with big saves, frustrating Utah's forwards and slowly draining the confidence out of their offense. By the end of the night, Chicago walked away with a dominant victory that very few people predicted. For Utah, it's a tough loss to swallow because they are right in the middle of a tightly contested playoff battle. Dropping points against teams lower in the standings can come back to haunt you later in the season. Sharks versus Jets. Meanwhile, the San Jose Sharks are also trying to keep themselves relevant in the playoff race. They faced a tough challenge this week against Olympic gold medalist Connor Hellebuyck, one of the best goaltenders in the entire league. Early in the game, it looked like Hellebuyck might completely steal the win for his team. At one point, San Jose had a wide-open net with a perfect opportunity to score. Somehow, Hellebuyck managed to reach back with his glove and make an unbelievable save that left everyone watching in disbelief. It was the kind of highlight reel moment that reminded everyone why he's considered one of the elite goaltenders in hockey. But the Sharks didn't give up. They kept pushing, firing shot after shot, and testing Hellebuck from every possible angle. Eventually, all that pressure paid off. San Jose managed to break through and tie the game, sending things to overtime. And that's when Michael Misa decided to take matters into his own hands. During 3-on-3 overtime, Misa found himself charging up the ice in what looked like an impossible situation, a 1-on-3 rush against multiple defenders. Most players would slow the play down or try to regroup, but not Misa. He kept skating, created just enough space, and ripped a shot past Hellebuck to seal the victory for the Sharks. It was a bold play and a massive moment for San Jose. Ducks shootout magic. Elsewhere around the league, the Anaheim Ducks delivered one of the most entertaining shootout moments of the week against the Calgary Flames. The hero of the moment was Mason McTavish. As he skated in during the shootout attempt, McTavish pulled off a brilliant fake that completely fooled the goalie. He sold the backhand move perfectly, causing the goaltender to bite on the fake. Once the goalie committed, McTavish calmly slid the puck through the 5-hole to score the game-winning goal. It was smooth, confident, and incredibly effective. Moments like that highlight just how much skill exists across the NHL. Even more interesting is the fact that the Ducks are suddenly starting to look like legitimate contenders in the Pacific Division. Earlier in the season, very few people expected Anaheim to be competing for the top spot in the division. But strong performances and timely wins have pushed them into the conversation. Panthers versus Islanders, historic rookie moment. But the biggest storyline of the week came from the matchup between the Florida Panthers and the New York Islanders. For Florida, every game right now feels like a must-win situation. Their playoff chances are hanging by a thread, and every lost point makes the path to the postseason even more difficult. Despite that pressure, the game turned into a showcase for one of the league's youngest rising stars. 18-year-old defenseman Matthew Schaefer had a night that fans won't forget anytime soon. Early in the game, Schaefer managed to score his 19th goal of the season after a fortunate bounce off a couple of sticks and skates in front of the net. That goal alone was already impressive, but the stat that followed made it even more incredible. With 19 goals, Schaefer officially had more goals than years he has been alive. And he wasn't done yet. Later in the game, with the score tied, Schaefer picked up the puck near the blue line, skated confidently toward the middle of the ice, and unleashed an absolute rocket past the goaltender. Goal number 20. That milestone placed him in extremely rare company. Schaefer became just the fourth rookie defenseman in NHL history to score 20 goals in a single season. It was an incredible achievement for such a young player. Unfortunately for Florida, the story didn't end the way they hoped. Just when it looked like the Panthers might escape the game with at least 1 point, Anders Lee drove hard to the net and buried the game-winning goal for the Islanders. New York celebrated the victory. Meanwhile, Florida's playoff hopes took another serious hit. The Panthers have now lost 6 of their last 8 games, leaving them 8 points outside of a playoff position. With only 22 games remaining in the season, their playoff probability has dropped to just 5.8%. At this point, Florida will need an incredible late-season run if they want to keep their postseason dreams alive. Emotional return for Fleury. Another memorable moment this week involved the Minnesota Wild and the return of a beloved veteran goaltender. When Marc-Andre Fleury stepped onto the ice, the crowd immediately erupted into applause. Fleury spent several memorable seasons in Minnesota, and the fans clearly haven't forgotten what he meant to the organization. Even though he now plays for the Carolina Hurricanes, the arena gave him a heartfelt standing ovation. Moments like that remind everyone how respected Fleury is around the league. Despite the emotional atmosphere, the game itself was highly competitive. Hurricanes goalie Frederik Andersen delivered a strong performance between the pipes. But the Wild refused to go away quietly. Late in the third period, Minnesota managed to tie the game and send things into overtime. And that's when Kirill Kaprizov stepped up. Kaprizov found the puck during overtime, created space, and fired the shot that sealed the comeback victory for Minnesota. Oilers versus Blues. Controversial call. Another dramatic game featured the Edmonton Oilers and the St. Louis Blues. At one point in overtime, it looked like Leon Draisaitl had scored the winning goal. The Oilers began celebrating, but then the officials initiated a lengthy video review. After examining the play from multiple angles, the referees determined that the puck had been played with a high stick before entering the net. The goal was waved off. Instead of ending in overtime, the game moved to a shootout. And that's where Jordan Binnington took over. Binnington stopped multiple attempts and secured the win for St. Louis. Physical battle in Detroit. The Dallas Stars and the Detroit Red Wings also delivered one of the most physical games of the week. At one point, Detroit defenseman Moritz Seider lined up Wyatt Johnston and delivered a massive hit that shook the entire arena. The play immediately raised the intensity of the game. Dallas responded shortly afterward by scoring, shifting momentum back in their favor. The Stars eventually took control and secured a 4-1 victory. Capitals versus Lightning. Finally, we saw a high-energy matchup between the Washington Capitals and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Early in the game, Nikita Kucherov opened the scoring with a perfectly placed shot that beat the goaltender cleanly. But Washington quickly responded, turning the game into a fast-paced back-and-forth battle. Both teams exchanged scoring chances and momentum swings throughout the night. In the end, the Capitals managed to pull away late and secure the victory. Final thoughts. Week 19 of the NHL season had everything. Historic rookie performances, emotional returns from beloved veterans, controversial officiating decisions, and playoff races that are tightening with every passing game. As the regular season enters its final stretch, the intensity across the league will only continue to increase. Every point matters. Every shift matters. And the race for the Stanley Cup playoffs is only getting more dramatic. The push toward the postseason is officially underway.